Hello and welcome back to TNWKS, the Now We Know show, the show where we discuss a topic of interest and by the end we will have learned something new and hopefully you will too. I'm Zak.
And I'm Buzz, and in this week's episode we're going to be discovering what bushcraft is all about.
If you enjoy the Now We Know show podcast, support Zak Wylde Productions on Patreon or join our members on YouTube for early access, ad-free content and exclusive episodes.
So here we are back in the studio, but before we start with this week's subject of bushcraft, I think we need to start with the new segment that Jack introduced last
week, yep.
Which is known as
Weird and Wonderful. So who has got...
I was going to ask you that. So who's come in with the story?
I've got a story this week.
You've got a story
I've got a story. So, the headline is, Monster Hunters are conducting the largest search of Loch Ness in more than 50 years.
Really?
For the Loch Ness Monster, funnily enough.
This year?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
right. So
I believe it was last weekend.
Right.
Last
okay.
weekend.
So what's that?
So it's the biggest search since 1972.
72. I think I recall that search, actually, being on the news.
Yeah?
Yeah, so...
What do you think about the Loch Ness Monster?
Well, I've been to Loch Ness many a time.
I have been once.
Yes.
I've got a Highland cow from there.
You did.
Just so
I've
listeners
been to
know.
the Nessie Centre a few times.
Yeah. What do you think?
I've stood on top of Iroquois Castle and looked to see if I can see any suspicious ripples or humps on the loch.
Yeah.
I've been down on the loch side where something did actually suddenly rise to the surface right in front of me. I was like, what the
Oh, yeah?
heck? Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What? Okay, this is news to me. Okay, I didn't know about this.
Yes. In fact, I think your mother was there. Well, she was there. And
Is this a euphemism?
So there we were on the shores of Loch Ness, and suddenly there's this bubbling and gurgling, and this big thing suddenly rose out of the water,
Yeah.
and it was a big yellow submarine.
Oh.
Yes.
What?
It was a submarine. It was a top sort of turret of a submarine.
Is it?
Well, I said not like a military submarine.
It was a Beatles song.
It was a submersible.
Was it a Beatles song?
Well, yellow submarine, but it was a submersible, but it was
Yep.
it was yellow. Yes.
Okay. Was it searching for Loch Ness?
Well, I
the
assume
Loch Ness Monster?
I'm assuming it was taking tourists or somebody for a ride in the loch. Yes, but that just suddenly emerged in front of us, which was quite.
So do you think...
so anyway, the Loch
Ness Monster, do you think it's legit?
Well, it goes right back to a saint whose name escapes me, who supposedly banished a beast, a serpent, from the loch many hundreds of years ago. Now, at the time, I would imagine that the loch would have still been connected to the open ocean there's a canal now.
There's underwater channels, isn't there?
I don't know.
Or maybe I'm just taking all my reference material from Doctor Who, Terror of the Zygons.
Either that or you're thinking of the Hollow Earth
It's actually
theory.
the Scarthazan from Terror of the Zygons.
There you go.
There we go.
But there was a time when the loch was connected by river to the sea, which perhaps allowed creatures like seals and things to come. Now I think it's all via locks now, because it's canaled and locked. I don't know if there is.
Don't know the specifics. Maybe we need to conduct
an
on-site visit from the Now We Know show podcast.
There may well have been something in the loch many years ago. I don't know.
You know what? I think.
But there are these types of. What do you call them?
Creatures?
Or creatures in many large lakes around.
In mythology, there's obviously been sightings and things all over the place, all over the world.
Yeah, North America, Canada.
This very much comes under the same category as your Bigfoot, your Beast of Bodmin Moor type of stuff. So maybe it's worth coming back.
What's your favourite one? Can you remember the name of him in
was it like Oogly Boogly or something?
Ogo Pogo.
Oh, so that's a sea serpent in America, isn't it?
Ogo Pogo.
Well, not a sea serpent, it's a lake serpent.
Yes,
well, it is a sea serpent, or supposedly a sea serpent, but it's in a lake.
Yes, but that was called
Ogo Pogo. That's a really good one. I like that.
Yeah. Anyway, so Loch Ness Monster.
Topic for another podcast, I think.
We shall have to put that into our cryptozoology.
Yes, maybe we could invite Glenn in, maybe June back in. That'd be really good.
Yes. Okay, we'd have to do a Loch Ness Monster.
Okie pokey
We'll
diddly
have to see
dokey.
what they come up with this weird and wonderful story that you've pulled out this week.
Yes. So when we're talking about bushcraft, what does that actually mean? What does the word bushcraft mean?
Okay, well, it's become a very popular word to use these days. But bushcraft, if you do a Google search, look at a dictionary, it generally refers to living survival skills that you would use living out in the Australian bush, in the outback.
Right.
So when you think of somebody saying...
So is this specifically in Australia?
It's an Australian term more than anything
So that's where
else.
it's originated from?
Yeah, say, hey, you don't want to get yourself lost out in the bush.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
something.
there is the outback,
That's
and they
it.
have bushes there,
Yeah,
apparently.
well, it's called out in the bush.
Yep.
So, but I mean, you could say the same in Africa, I suppose. But when you do a quick Google, it usually refers it to Australia. Whereas more kind of in the UK.
It has become a more widely used term
Yeah, it's been a widely used term
for going
probably
outside
in-
and kind of
living in the world.
living in the wild. Yeah.
In the UK, it's probably most popularised by the TV series by Mears, and that came out.
Yes. I remember getting that for you for your birthday.
Yeah, that was a while ago, and he brought I think he basically in the UK brought it to the fore, and has now become like a.
He's done so many books.
Everybody refers
TV series.
to good old Ray. I've seen him on stage myself, and he does attend the annual Bushcraft show in the UK.
Is it Bushcraft and Survival Show, or is it
I think
literally
it's
just the Bushcraft?
show. I think there might be several actually.
The two terms could be considered a bit interchangeable here, don't you reckon?
Well, I think we'll cover that in a second. The fact with bushcraft, I think it's more apt to use other terminologies if you live in other areas of the world. Probably, if you're living in North America, Canada, in England even, I would prefer to say either wilderness skills or woodlore, which is
Yeah, I can see that.
basically understanding the skills of living in the woodland. You see, but bushcraft is
Blanket term.
It's a blanket term which everybody's become used to. So basically it means be able to live out in the wild. Now, you did mention just then about what's the difference or
I mentioned survival.
Yeah, the similarity between bushcraft
And survival.
and survival.
What is there a delineation between the two?
I'd say that you can separate the two. I mean, both are intertwined, obviously.
Yes.
But there is a big difference, really, when you're talking bushcraft and you're talking survival skills. Of course, you are applying survival skills when you're doing bushcraft, but bushcraft is all about going out into the wilds and living in that environment comfortably.
Right.
Yeah, to be able to have shelter, to have fire, to have water, to have food, and to live in an environment comfortably.
Yeah.
And to make the most of all the materials
And
all
resources.
the resources around you. Whereas survival skills, obviously they come under the same skill set, but with survival skills, it's more of a case of when you're talking about I would like to learn survival skills, it's because they're designed to do exactly that. You are in a situation.
Is it for instance if you've been thrown into a situation you did not
Yes,
expect?
Exactly. So
Whereas you would choose to go and bushcraft.
That's it. You'd go and bushcraft. You know what you're doing, but if you are suddenly thrust into a situation, a survival situation, which might be dependent on the area of land that you are on, it could, you could be in an arid desert environment. You could be in snow. You could be in a deep forest. You could be in a jungle. You could be at sea. You could be on an island. All these things, and with minimal to no supplies or tools.
Yes, you're not prepared. Well, could you be prepared in a survival situation, or
well, I suppose you could.
does that come down into that kind of EDC thing we keep talking
that
about?
really comes to EDC. That's because, for example, if
You can't anticipate that situation, can you?
No, but if you were, say you were working in the outback in Australia, not so much. I'm going to use that as an example. Could be America or Africa or India or anywhere, but where there's a large landmass. And you've got hundreds upon hundreds of miles of nothingness, if you like, which is not a case in the UK. You know, if you want to go out into the wilds into the UK, you could probably walk for an hour and come across a McDonald's. You know?
Oh dear.
You'd have to get
What does that say about
You probably have to get up
the
to
UK at the moment?
Probably have to get up to Scotland, the Highlands, or somewhere. But to be fair, there's no real big areas of wild desolation in the UK. So if you were say working in, and I've seen and read plenty of stories of survival situations in Africa and obviously in the outback in Australia.
I mean, you always see Bear Grylls doing all these, like squeezing moisture out of elephant dung.
Well, that's the thing. That's a good example, Zach, because you would do that in a survival situation
compared to possibly Ray Mears cooking a nice seasoned salmon over an open fire.
Exactly. Well, you might say, I've got a choice. I could either go to the nice babbling brook and fetch my water, or I could squeeze my water out of the elephant dung. Well,
I know what I would choose.
Exactly. But in a survival situation, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, precisely.
So you need those skills. And if you are in the outback, as I was saying, and you may be somebody who is delivering post or having to fly in a small plane to different places, there's always going to be the possibility that your plane could have a malfunction.
And these kind of programs we see on, like, I can't remember what the channel is, but on TV you see them all the time.
You do.
Like people recounting these stories of they've been thrown into this situation and they've got to survive.
So if you're in a plane and it comes down, a small light aircraft, you'd like to think that you've already, because you're in that situation of doing it as a job for whatever reason, that you've taken supplies with you if that occurs.
You would hopefully anticipate that,
of course,
as an eventuality.
Of course, you might have further challenges, because if the plane doesn't come down nicely, you could also come down and find that you're injured.
Yeah, which could cause a whole manner of problems.
Exactly. So that's survival, trying to overcome a situation to either stay where you are till somebody finds you, or to get yourself out of a situation and back to populated area.
I think the key thing is here, like, you would choose to go and do bushcraft.
Yes.
You would choose to go, okay, I'm going hiking for the weekend, I'm going wild camping. We did do a podcast on wild camping, by the way, so do check that out.
Yeah,
and survival is this, I have been thrown into this situation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people kind of get into bushcraft, I suppose, through the idea of survival.
Yes, but that is pushing it, the idea kind of to the extreme.
Learning survival techniques is part of bushcraft.
That is very true.
But you learn a lot more doing bushcraft beyond just the survival techniques, because obviously you can craft things, you can do so much more.
We're talking about bushcraft. That does bring up the question of, how did you get into bushcraft?
Well, that's a good place to start with.
Because I got into bushcraft through you.
Now that I've given that some thought, and it's something that's kind of been with me all through my life, right from my earliest memories of being a child. I've got to be honest, I grew up in Hemel Hempstead. Now, for anybody who knows Hemel Hempstead, it was a new town built just outside London, north of Watford. But back in the day, back in the 60s, although it was a new town, it wasn't anything like it is now. There was still, where I lived, you were literally a 5-minute walk and you're in the countryside. And I used to spend all my time as a kid in the countryside, and even closer to...
I mean, every time we pass that area, you're always pointing out all these different places you visited.
I mean, the place has changed so much. But even on my doorstep, I could literally walk across the road to a wood called Briery Way Woods, which... for a young kid, it was a big wood. I don't know if it's shrunk at all these days, or feels as big as it's used, or bits of it being sold off. But again, I used to spend all my time building camps up the woods by myself or with my friends. So it was I had an outdoor life. Now, what actually got me into that? Because what attracted me to that is I've given it some thought, and I think it was things like, there was a TV programme you won't be familiar with, which was called The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe, which came out in the 60s. But it had a very, for those people of my age, it's a very recognisable theme tune. And it's probably through watching programmes like that and seeing the kind of how would you say, just like the excitement of kind of being stranded on a desert island and having to fish and light fires.
Would another one that I'm a bit more familiar with be Grizzly Adams, maybe?
That comes a lot later. I'm going to play you the theme tune. I don't think you'll probably even recognise it, but those people listening to the podcast will. So for those that may remember, this is the intro music for The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe. 'Twas 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 That's the first episode. His ship's about to be wrecked.
Spoilers,
No.
spoilers. Although Robinson Crusoe is definitely a classic.
So the story of Robinson Crusoe and the whole idea of a person stranded on a desert island has become synonymous worldwide. Everybody loves.
I mean,
the
there's
story.
so many stories.
Yeah.
So is this the original I'm stuck on a desert island story?
Yeah, I think that's where it stems from. And Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe,
Yep.
he got his inspiration from a chap called Selkirk, who was a ship hand, a sailor, who had left his ship in the Pacific, and I'm not sure why. I can't remember offhand. I think maybe there was a dispute with working on the ship, and he was dropped off on an island in the Pacific.
Oh, crikey.
Where I believe he intended to be for about 4 months until another trade ship came past to pick him up, and it never came.
Oh.
And so he found himself not being on the island for 4 months. He found himself on the island for over 4 years.
Oh, dear.
And so when the ship finally did pick up Mr. Selkirk...
I mean, did they deliberately go looking for him? Or is it just a passing ship he managed
I just think he felt...
signal or something?
I don't know. I feel he probably hoped that there would be ships and he'd signal them and get picked up.
Blimey.
But he found himself stuck on there for 4 years. And when he was found, he was described as being dressed in goat skins.
Fair.
And when
feral.
he got back to the UK, his story was obviously in the news. People heard about it, and that's where Daniel Defoe picked up on the story of Selkirk and based his story of Robinson Crusoe on that. And in fact, I think the name Robinson Crusoe actually is an actual person who is buried in Kingsland in Norfolk, who was a fisherman.
Wow.
That's where he takes the name Robinson Crusoe.
Nice.
But that was like your archetypal
And
type
now
of
you know.
survival story of being on a desert island.
He's been on that island. How does he survive?
Yeah. Well, so watching things like that as a kid, and then coming through the 70s, where later in the 70s, you've already mentioned, you had
Grizzly Adams.
Grizzly Adams, which again was great, out in the wilderness and everything. There was also a TV program at the time during the 70s, which I introduced you to not so long ago, which was presented by Jack Hargreaves, and that was called Out of Town.
Yes.
And the great
I
thing,
really enjoyed that.
the great thing with Out of Town, it used to show you all of what was happening in the countryside and how the old ways of doing things, you see. You know, the old ways of hunting and trapping and making hurdles and just
Fishing,
and just general country life. And all this just as I think
even
it just
bird watching.
even bird watching. It all imprinted on me.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I think it was because as a family we used to do a lot of camping, and my father himself.
Well, still aim to, yes.
Yeah, and my father had been in the Royal Navy, and he imparted sort of like stories to me about his adventures around the world, being on
Wow,
ship.
that's really interesting.
And of course, he did some survival skills while he was, a sailor on in the Navy. Because he showed me about lighting fires and things when I was a kid. So it's kind of just something that, unwittingly or unknowingly, I've just loved, fell into, and grown up with.
And subsequently you have bestowed that knowledge upon me.
Well, I hope
At least
so.
hopefully.
But that's the thing about bushcraft, is because bushcraft is just not about, I've got to rub two sticks together to make a fire.
Yeah. It's not scrambling down a cliff edge trying to chase after a helicopter. That's typical Bear Grylls right there.
That's right.
I feel sorry for the cameraman who's abseiling down the waterfall with him, one-handed.
Yeah, if you ever watch those programs, always think of it. You're watching it. Think of it from the fact that you're watching it from the cameraman's angle.
Do you remember the episode? I think it was one of these new Bear Grylls series where he took, I think it was What's It Delavine, and they were abseiling down a cliff.
Yep.
And they were just chucking this silly little grappling hook, trying to lock it onto a stone in a pond.
Oh yes.
And I'm like, come on, no, no.
I think they take a little bit of. I think there
Dramatic license.
Dramatic license. I think there was one point where he was in Iceland and he was crossing a crevasse which
I know this one.
which got
I know this one.
a lava bridge.
Yep.
And he's standing on it and he's stamping on it with his foot, saying you've got to be really careful when crossing these crevasses because this lava could give away at any time. And then we actually saw a camera shot from a different angle where there's
This is where somebody has obviously seen this and subsequently gone there.
There's loads of coaches parked next to
Yeah,
it.
it's like
It wasn't-
half a mile from a road.
It's not in the middle of nowhere, is it? It's hilarious. But anyway, Bear Grylls, gotta love him. He comes at it.
Well, he's the head of the Chief Scout, isn't he?
Yes, he is Chief
Yeah.
Scout. He took over from the guy from Blue Peter, whose name escapes, Peter Duncan.
They are.
But anyway, yeah, he does it his way.
Yeah, of
And
course.
again, you can go.
Everyone has their way.
And you can go and get Bear Grylls books as much as you can go and get
Knives,
books and everything. And of
cutlery,
course, when you're
type
talking
things,
about books,
tents.
you can learn a lot from books, but you need to put it into practical.
That is very true.
Yeah,
That is very true.
You've got to practically test these things and get to learn these things. That's the wonderful fun of.
It's putting the knowledge into practice.
Yeah, but once you've got that knowledge, then for the best part, you're sorted.
Yes, and practicing it helps
Yeah.
maintain that knowledge.
And
It
of course,
reinforces
so,
it.
yeah, and when you come to those kind of books, you've got Ray Mears, you've got
Bear Grylls.
Bear Grylls, and you've got John Lofty Wiseman, who you might not recognise the name of. You're looking at me quizzically.
Yeah, I am looking a bit quizzical.
He's the very well-known chap who wrote the SAS survival book.
Oh, is it that massive big square book?
Yeah. And they do a small
That is a
one.
really good book.
Yeah, the
That's really
SAS one. So yeah, Lofty Wiseman, very, 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 very well-known name up there with Ray Mears.
I really love the traps and the weapons that you can create in it for hunting.
What you're describing is every kind of stereotypical schoolboy.
I know.
Loves the traps.
I know.
But okay, so there I am as a young kid in the 70s, and then you're talking about books. So my father gave me a book back in 1975 because I've got a first edition, which is
Wow.
I believe it's up in the attic in the house somewhere, because the one I've actually got in the studio
Oh,
with
okay.
me is a later edition, and it's How to Survive by Brian Hildreth, and he as an author of the New Zealand Air Force Special Survival books. But this was published, as I say, first published in 1975, and that's when I was given it by my father, and I loved this book, and I don't even know if many people have even heard of How to Survive by Brian Hildreth, but
I mean, it's new to me.
I learnt so much from that
Really?
one book. And
Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I do, and I carry it with me even now in my EDC
Wow.
as kind of both a homage to my roots as
Yeah.
well as because it's a good read. And
I'll have to give that a go.
I've read it so many times, I keep on reading it, but it covers you for your fire and your shelter and your food and navigation and all those kind
Yeah,
of
because
things.
there are all these different aspects to
That's it.
this bushcraft.
And like shelter building in different environments and things like
Yes.
that. But bushcraft is more than going and sleeping out under the stars. It is literally taking a walking stick, and I always take a walking stick, walking stave,
It's
whatever.
very useful.
Very useful thing, having a walking stave. But it's just going for a walk. As you mentioned, going for a hike. Yeah, just go for a hike. But while you're on a hike, you've got the choice. You can hike in your bright orange cagoule and your ergonomically designed
spring-loaded
aluminium walking
tent
sticks,
poles.
and you can just walk there while nature takes one look.
Passes you by, and you're being
Well,
so loud,
and nature
taking selfies, photos, whatever.
Nature looks at you and
Runs.
does a runner, and you're thinking, do you know, there's meant to be deer around here.
It's supposed to be the lesser spotted Usalam bird.
I know, but
That's from Carry On Up the Jungle, isn't
the
it?
New Zealand bird. I'm being cheeky, but the point is, you can go off for a ramble,
Yeah.
and enjoy being outside. But bushcraft is, when you go for a walk, is to look at the plants around you, to look at the insects,
Yeah.
to look at the tracks, to look at the environment.
We're not talking like a hippy dippy style, all look some trees.
No.
We are talking to have an understanding of what you're looking at.
Identify the foliage,
Yes.
identify the bushes and the trees, and then to look into it more and to understand, what maybe medicinal purposes they've got, what kind of capabilities for firelighting they've got,
Yeah.
what fruit do they bear throughout
The year.
year. Can I use the thorns for making fish hooks? Can I, make a tea out of the needles? All these things. recognising watercourses, recognising all sorts of things in the environment, tracking the animals that are around you, seeing where they are. And that's why I like to, rather than stand out in the environment, I like to blend in more with my attire, because...
I mean, you're wearing camouflage right now. I can hardly see you.
But people do sort of say, oh, why are you doing that? But I do spend a lot of my time in the woods. And people argue, oh, you know, it doesn't matter what colours you wear. I do believe it does, because if it's a bright colour and you do a small movement, it's noticed. If you're in camouflage, you can move a bit and you don't look anything more than like a bush in the wind that might have just moved a little bit. Yeah. But bright colours do stick out like a sore thumb.
They do.
And but if you just...
And in some situations, that could be key to your survival. For instance, if you're stranded somewhere.
No, of course.
But from the bushcraft perspective...
That's why I'd say in your EDC, you should always have an emergency blanket, because an emergency blanket are usually bright silver, reflective silver, so they reflect the heat on you, but they also can be seen, you know. But we're not talking about survival today, we're talking about bushcraft. So you can go out and you can literally say, need nothing more than your feet, and you can just walk out, lean against a tree, sit down, lean against a tree, and just let nature do the rest. You're
not pressured in this situation. You only do what you feel you want to do.
Exactly. So, you can go the full stint. Let's maybe look at a level. So you can go for a walk, or you can choose to say, I'm going to go out and stay overnight outside, or you can say, right, I'm going to go and stay for a few nights outside. So it depends on what you want to do. Whether you want to do, go out bushcrafting in the forest, whether you want to be in the mountains, whether you want to be on the moors, whether you want to be on the coast. It depends, but bushcraft is all around us. It's understanding and being able to comfortably live in the environment and to learn the skills that allow you to do that.
And that can have a lot of actually quite positive physical and mental benefits as well.
The mental benefits you get from that, everybody talks about mental health these days, and people are stressed and
anxiety
and everything. Whereas when you take that time out, you become in touch with nature and you just relax.
It can be very beneficial.
Very beneficial. I mean, I'm a great advocate, as you know, of mindfulness.
All right.
Mindfulness is a mental health skill.
And I think it is on the cards for a podcast.
I will do a mindfulness podcast, and I think I'm going to be bold, but I'm going to say when we do that podcast, it's the kind of podcast when you listen to it, it can change your life. Okay. And I've not just learned, but benefited hugely from mindfulness, and bushcraft is part of that. Being out in the wild, being out in the environment, and you can bushcraft if you like. If you live in a city or in a town, you can go out into just an urban park, somewhere like that, and you can still experience the benefits of being outside and still employ...
It's exercising this mindfulness, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's still you're still able to employ skills, whether you're in a park or whether you're out in a deep forest somewhere. It's down to you. But there are, we've mentioned some very well-known people that have written books, had TV shows, but also on my journey of enjoying and learning about bushcraft over the years, there was a story back in 1982 of a couple who went to an island, and Lucy Irvine, she wrote a book called Castaway, and I don't know if that rings a bell with anybody, and they also did a film where Oliver Reed played the lead parts.
Really?
I can't think of the actress who played the part of Lucy, but Oliver Reed played the part of Gerald Kingsland. Now, Gerald Kingsland was the chap who initiated the adventure to an island called Tywin, just off North Australia, in the Torres Straits, and they basically spent a year living on this little island. The idea was that Gerald Kingsland always wanted to replicate the experience of Robinson Crusoe, and he himself had been in the British Army, and
that is quite the thing. That is quite the undertaking.
Yeah, well, he'd been in the British Army. He got certain survival skills, and he tried it several times. And you can read. He wrote a book called The Islander, and it's his account of trying it until he eventually got the opportunity to go to Tewin Island. But that was the thing. He wanted to try and get to an island which was uninhabited and survive like Robinson Crusoe, which eventually they kind of did with Castaway for the first kind of 6 months of that. And then it actually was very, very, very difficult for them. They had a lot of medical issues and things until the local islanders started to arrive to check on them. And then, I'm not going to spoil the story, but they started to interact with the islanders. They got more supplies, they got friendships.
But these are real life accounts.
These are real life accounts. But my point was, I love that story, and I read The Islander by Gerald Kingsland, and I always thought that he was a chap. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but he was a chap that if anybody should have written a book about bushcraft or survival, bushcraft and survival, he should have, because he had loads of experience, but he didn't actually end up writing any books about it.
Just his account.
Just his account of
this adventure.
Yeah, his adventures trying to get the Robinson Crusoe experience. There are lots of people out there that you can that would have been really interesting to have drawn upon their knowledge that haven't written down things, but just as much as those people that we all know, if we mentioned Ray Mears and Lofty Wiseman. Nowadays, you can literally go onto YouTube and places like that, where lots of people, bushcrafters, have their own channels.
Yeah, that is very true. Are there any you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, I'll give a shout out to a local chap, a friend of mine, JJ Outdoors. You can look up JJ Outdoors. There's another one by a lady who I don't know personally, but her channel's called Wild Bear. The reason I like her channel is because she's a single lady. And she goes out and does bushcraft, and she really is inspirational for any ladies out there that
are looking to get into it,
that want to get into bushcraft and that maybe have a fear of going out into the countryside and camping out by themselves.
Wow, yeah.
And she does it all the time, and you can get a lot of inspiration from her channel. There's plenty of others. There's Stag Outdoors. There's all sorts, and of course my own channel. East Bed Bushcraft.
Oh, yeah.
I happen to live in East Bedfordshire, so there you go, East Bed Bushcraft, if anybody wants to take a look at that. So you've got now not just books, because we live in an age where when I was a kid and I picked up my How to Survive book, and my How to Survive book showed me with little pencil drawings how I should be preparing a fire and how to light a fire. Now you can literally just pull your phone out your pocket,
a video,
look at a video, and go, "Oh, okay, I see."
Okay, I've seen that way of doing it. Okay, it didn't necessarily work as well. Possibly I could try something else.
Well, I think that's when it comes to bushcraft. You shouldn't beat yourself down if you can't light a fire, for example. Everybody wants to learn to light a fire.
Things do come with practice.
Just practice, and preparation is key when lighting fires. And there's so many different ways you can light fires, and when it comes to bushcraft, you just want to make sure that you learn, a few ways, and to make sure that if you're off out, or you've got your EDC, or if you've got your bug out bag, or whatever you're taking as your kit with you, that you always have more than one way to light a fire.
Yeah.
What's the old saying?
Oh,
come on, you know this. Dad taught you this one.
Oh no! What do you mean? What's saying?
Well, I'm saying about more than one thing to
do. 2 is 1, 1 is none.
Exactly.
We've definitely covered that in the prepping podcast.
So 2 is 1 and 1 is none is probably one of the most important things when it comes to bushcraft.
It is it works. It works.
If you've got minimum of 2 ways of lighting a fire, then if you lose one,
you've still got
one. If you've got a knife to do your bushcraft
you lose it breaks.
Well, but you've got a second one, fine. But if you've only got one and you lose
and then you've
got none.
Yeah.
So you always have a backup. And the thing about, I think really when it comes to bushcraft and survival, people always want to learn how to light fires. And you can light fires with aids such as obviously a box of matches, a box of the kind of like the survival matches, the storm matches. You can use a lighter, Which is fine. I'm not going to knock people using a lighter. I have people say, why do you want to do all these old skills of lighting fires when you can just light a fire with a lighter? It's fine until the flint gets soggy.
Yeah, you got it.
So, you can have a whole pack of Bitka lighters in your backpack. That's fine. It's not a problem. But if you can learn to light fire
Without
things, so if you can literally go out there
without something that has been processed,
exactly
modern tech.
If you can go out there and say, hey, I can split this piece of wood and make a hearth, and I can take that little branch and I can fashion it into a spindle, and I can either do it by make a hand drill, or you can make a bow drill, take your shoelace off, or make some cordage using a root, or some nettle cordage or whatever.
It is a skill. It is a skill.
But if you take your time, then you can make a hand drill or a bow drill, and you can create fire. And if you can do that, then wherever you are, you carry that fire inside you.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I think you've talked about the fire diamond. Is your terminology for it, isn't it?
Exactly. A lot of people, when you talk about how to create fire, they always talk about the fire triangle, because obviously you need ignition, you need oxygen, you need the material to burn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all fine when you're talking about health and safety, and you're talking about health and safety in a factory environment or wherever, where maybe an electrical spark can accidentally start a fire, or you've got flammable fluids or gases around, things like that. But when you're out in the forest, it becomes not a triangle, but it becomes a diamond, and that's the most important thing, because you need your source of ignition, you need the material to burn, you need oxygen, but none of that's going to make fire if it hasn't got you in there as well.
And you've got to know what you're doing.
You've got to know. And so it's both fun, educational, and, as you say, great way of de-stressing, learning how to do it. And you shouldn't get frustrated when you learn these new bushcraft skills, because you can learn these skills and they don't always work every time.
Yeah.
And, you can have, you could try 99 times at trying to light a fire and it doesn't work, but it does on the 100th. And that's what counts. If you give up on the 50th, you're never going to get there. And that goes back to the survival skills. You've got to
practice it.
Got to keep going and believe in yourself.
Because you'll get better and better.
But that's not, lighting a fire. You can be straightforward with bushcraft. You can just take a box of matches and you can go out. Obviously, I'm not going to cover all the ins and outs of lighting fires out in the countryside at the moment, because technically it's completely illegal. You shouldn't be lighting open fires in the countryside, wherever you are, unless you are on private land
and have permission.
The landowner's permission. So that's how it goes, but we all know people do. But if you're going to go and do anything like that, which I'm not condoning unless you are doing it sensibly, but if you were lighting a fire maybe on the river, where you've got the river bed, a dry river bed, and you're next to the water, or on the sand out by the coast, things like that, then that's less likely to cause an issue. But you shouldn't be doing any of that stuff without permission and certainly practice. And of course, bushcrafters are very, very responsible people, and they will go out there, and if they're having a fire, a lot of the time they'll take their own little fold out firebox.
Yeah, you'll know the ones that aren't the respectful, and they're the ones that take those awful barbecues.
The ground-based barbecues.
They're
not bushcrafters.
No.
The thing is, you'll know if you've met. Well, actually, technically, you won't know if you go somewhere and the place is pristine. And it doesn't look like anybody's been there before, then it's more likely a bushcrafter's been there, because they leave it without any trace.
That's very key.
They are excellent people for making sure that if they've gone out into the wilds, they leave no trace.
That was definitely one of the high points, I think, from the Wild Camping podcast. Yeah,
that's again one of the key things up there, is leave no trace. But you don't need to go out and light a fire to do bushcraft. You don't need to.
No, you don't get some special badge. There's no achievement or trophy unlocked.
I don't know. There's a lot
for it.
There's a lot of companies out there these days that do these kind of bushcraft and survival
weekends
and courses, and they will give you an achievement.
We have done one. Do you remember? Do you remember?
We did one for Chaz's
stag do.
Yeah,
it was very funny because we did do a short Bushcraft parody of Predator for that.
Yeah.
Predator, a stag do parody, which is available on the Zak Wylde Productions YouTube channel.
Yeah, that was good fun.
It was hilarious.
That was sort of like fitted in between the sort of survival skill bits. But yeah, and everybody that went on that weekend enjoyed what they did, and it was good fun. But yeah, bushcraft. Bushcraft is something that everybody can enjoy. Bushcraft is something everybody can benefit from, and especially children. They absolutely love getting involved with bushcraft, hands-on it, and it's.
I mean, to be honest, you could go into the wild and you always see these little kind of lean-to shelter type things where kids have just been putting logs up against a tree.
But basically, they're called debris shelters.
Essentially, is bushcraft, but they don't know that they're practicing it.
Yeah, and kids will do that. They will go out there and they will put logs and twigs and stuff up against around the base of a tree, or if a tree's fallen over, so they'll make like a lean-to and then cover it with leaves, etc. And that's great. Then you get other ones that try uprooting saplings and literally snapping.
That is somebody without the knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people that have actually had, with permission, bushcraft camps, with permission, made with care and in sympathy with the environment around them. And I've seen those camps wrecked by just
by idiots.
Teenage idiots, or probably, I can't believe that they're full adults. They might be full adults, but just people who come in there and just
with no respect
wrecked them. And there's empty cans of beans, and there's burnt scorches everywhere and things like this. That's not bushcraft.
No.
So anyway,
that's hoodlumism.
But we're talking about bushcraft, and bushcraft is something that everybody can benefit from, and I think that it benefits you not just in when you're out doing the bushcraft, but when you're back in your everyday life, you can apply things even then, because you can just be in a different environment you've never been in before, and instead of ignoring the environment, you start going, oh, now I've not seen that plant before. I wonder what that is. I need to identify that. Oh, I've seen a different bird, or I've seen a different mammal.
Would you say that it's, to begin with, it's having this curiosity? This curiosity to look into something.
I think you want to. I think you've got to be somebody who likes the outdoors. Otherwise, you're really not.
Definitely.
And I think that if you're somebody that likes the outdoors, then learning bushcraft skills, it just enhances your experience of the outdoors. It's just not. Going for a hike and not really doing anything other than walking.
Right.
Yeah. So walking, you might be taking in the scenery, and that's great, and that's fine. Go for a walk, get the exercise, that's great. Getting the fresh air, that's great. But combining that with your identification skills, your tracking skills, the ability to...
It's a whole bevy of skills, isn't it?
I mean, I suppose a lot of people would say, oh, I'm going to pack up my sandwiches, stick a can of Coke in there, stick a banana or an orange in.
Sounds like a good afternoon.
And I'm going to go out for a walk, and then they go, oh, there's no bin around, or they discard their rubbish.
That's the wrong thing to do.
Crisp packet, your banana skin, your empty can of Coke. Bushcrafter might go out and say, okay, I'm going for a walk. I know where I'm going. I know there's a water supply. I'm going to take maybe even just their own little methylated spirit burner or something, but they're going to make a nice cup of coffee, have a little cook up while they're there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of people. I think harking back to the TV show Out of Town, do you recall the episode we watched where people were out fishing?
Yeah.
And while they were out fishing, they actually made a little fire next to the river.
Yeah.
And cooked themselves up some fish.
Imagine that now. Imagine that now. Everyone would be like,
yeah, I know. But what I'm saying is the thing is that
they did it respectfully.
They thought, I'm going to be able to eat my dinner and cook my dinner while I'm
in situation,
and then clear it all away so it's like I've never been there.
Precisely. It's having that fundamental idea that I'm going to leave no trace.
I mean, the amount of times especially this time of the year in the autumn, when you're walking along and you see fruit-laden bushes, not necessarily next to the road where there might be saturated and lovely pollution, but
I wouldn't say lovely. No,
not lovely. I was being sarcastic, but you go out there and you say, Oh, I'm walking through the forest, blackberries. Oh, I'll be having a whale of a time. I was in a wood the other day, there were blackberries. There were wild plums where people over the years had discarded plums and plum trees had grown. Apple trees, all sorts of stuff.
All these things.
I'll be out there and, I'm feeling a little bit nibbly. I'll get some nettle leaves, roll them up in my fingers.
But you have somebody from a town or a city see you do that. They are going to be...
Yeah. Well, they're going to be the ones that are going to starve as well. They'll be hungry.
Well, they're the ones you're going to eat.
No. They'll be full of irradiated preservatives. Yeah. Anyway, so let's not get too off track. So bushcraft is a wonderful thing that everybody can benefit from and learn from, and you can relax into. Just take your time. It's the relaxing side of survival skills.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it.
It's learning to live in the wild comfortably. Yeah, relaxed. Like you say, you can do it the mears way, where you've got caught salmon, and you lean up.
You found some wild herbs.
Yes, you're seasoning it with wild herbs, and you're cooking your salmon, or you're squeezing the juice out of an elephant dung.
Again, there is definitely a preferred one of those two options.
You could argue always go bushcrafting or always survive with a fat bushcrafter.
So, to somebody who is possibly new to bushcrafting, what would you say is the best way to get into it?
Well, I suppose you've got to firstly say, what is it that you are looking to do with your bushcraft skills? Are you looking just to head out for walks? Or are you looking to, which most people want to do, is to go and stay out overnight. And to stay out overnight, so you're going to need a minimum amount of equipment, depending on what you've got planned, what the season is, because obviously you want shelter. I mean, I do this thing that I call champing.
Champing?
I know, it sounds a bit... It's because of doing bat surveys.
Is it because you're a champion of camping?
No, it's...
I mean, we have got quite a few tents.
It's camping, but with a chair. So, chair camping, champing.
Okay.
Okay. And it's basically I've got a real nice chair that I can fall asleep in quite easily. Fold-up chair. So, it folds up. I can strap it over my back if I want to. And in the summertime, literally, you can be in your clothes you're in, and I can go out, put my chair up anywhere and fall asleep.
Yeah,
in my chair
because it's not camping.
It's not camping.
Or is it?
Technically, camping classifies as being under canvas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Being under a shelter.
Under a shelter, but not if you're sitting in a chair.
So, that's your workaround.
But yes, you work around. But you can do anything you like. You can go out and you can...
Like, for instance, it is illegal to set up a tent on like a public footpath.
Yeah, you can't camp on a public
You cannot
footpath.
do that.
No, you can't.
You're not allowed to.
No, I could stick my chair there, though.
But the workaround is you could sit in a chair
I could
fall
sit in
asleep.
a chair, fall asleep in my chair. Yeah, there's no big deal. Because I'm not under canvas.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, putting the champing to one side, the thing is, you can go out there and your minimum, depending again on the season, but you can have a bivvy bag. And a bivvy bag is like a waterproof sleeping bag. Zips up the side. And they come in different styles. They come in different qualities as well. So some aren't brilliant and others are fantastic. But if you've got a bivvy bag, then literally you can be in the clothes you're standing in. A bivvy bag will pack down to something you can just hold in one hand. It's very small. And that's your shelter. Yeah, wow. You have that in your backpack. You can go out and then you literally bed down in your bivvy bag, and if it absolutely pours with rain, you should be fine. But then you just go from there. If you feel you need a light sleeping bag, if you feel you need a ground sheet, if you want a tarp to go over the top to make a roof.
Because I know a lot of people are going to be kind of held back because they're going to want a lot of modern necessities that aren't necessarily going to be the most practical things.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think people that don't like camping is because they don't like being without their modern necessities. People who desire and love the idea of bushcraft and the outdoor life is because they want to kind of get away from the modern necessities, but still live comfortably.
Yeah, because that is a thing. Camping can be done comfortably.
camping,
You've just got to know how to do it.
I would challenge anybody and say that anybody that's been camping and said they've had a hideous time because they've been freezing cold.
Oh, I've known a good
they've
few
been
of those.
freezing cold.
Good for you.
You know, and they've been shivering, and and it's wet and it's horrible and blah blah blah. That's because they've done it wrong.
Precisely.
They just wrong.
Is it the equipment that they brought from Go Outdoors?
Is
it the fact that they don't know how to use it?
Could be equipment.
Lack of knowledge?
Could be quality of the equipment, lack of knowledge and understanding how to use that equipment.
Definitely a big one.
I mean, the other, no names, no pack drills, but you were actually with me at the time, but we were on a campsite a few months ago where we were hit by an absolute downpour. And there was this chap with this very small tent that you could see the rain was starting to get into the tent.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
And what did he do? Rather than wait for the rain to pass, he went and opened his tent to try and sort the problem out, and everything just went pear-shaped.
Yeah.
His tent filled up with water, his clothes were soaked, he was soaked. 5 minutes later, rain had stopped.
Had he just waited?
If he just waited, it was fine. But what happened was everything that he had was saturated, and he stood there in his clothes, saturated to the skin.
Yeah.
Literally, that was it. He had no dry clothes or anything. And so, just calm down. Understand what you got. Take advice.
Understand the situation.
And let's just do it by the book, nice and carefully. So we're comfortable.
There is no rush. There is no rush when it comes to bushcraft.
That's probably key factor as well, when it comes to bushcraft, you shouldn't rush. There's no reason to rush. You rush.
It's supposed to be a leisure.
You rush.
It's a leisure activity.
You rush, you'll make a mistake, like cut your finger with a knife or do something silly like that.
We've known a few of those as well.
I've known people that have done that. Rush. And calm. Breathe.
You're supposed to enjoy it.
And exhale.
That's the thing. You want to enjoy it.
Exactly. So there's nothing... But again, other people are different. I've taken people out into the countryside before, and they've freaked out because suddenly there's flies, there's bugs. Not used to this because we don't get them in the town. I don't have all this. There's bugs and they're the crickets and they're making noises. And it's like, okay, calm down.
Okay, so that brings on to maybe possibly the last question.
Okay.
Just to round this up.
Yeah. We can talk more about more specific areas of bushcraft. This conversation is really just being about what is bushcraft.
Yeah. So my question is there any equipment you would recommend for bushcrafting?
For bushcraft, I would say, I
Or what do you need? What do you need?
Technically, you don't need a lot because you really, it depends what you're trying to get out of it again. You can just start. Is
there like a fundament? Is it like one of these little survival kits you buy off of eBay or Amazon for
really.
like 10 quid?
No.
What is it? What is it that gets you started? What is going to be the most useful thing for someone either who has practiced bushcraft for a reasonable amount of time and may already have it, or somebody who's looking to get into it and thinks, you know what, that is the one thing I need. I definitely need that.
I would say the one thing that you definitely need is... Well, I can't really put it down to one thing.
Well, maybe I can go a bit broader than one thing. What's your kind of basic, useful, fundamental kit list?
Okay. I would have a way of cooking. So basically a canteen set, which doesn't have to be expensive. So you've got a cup and you've got some way of boiling water or heating food.
I mean, our Crusader kits are really good.
Crusader kits are fine.
I always find that Army Surplus is always a great place to get stuff from.
Army Surplus is great. Go second hand, save yourself some money. Have a comfortable waterproof backpack that you can comfortably wear and that can carry your equipment in it. Make sure that you've got a good waterproof. So a coat or a poncho. I tend to prefer a poncho. My favourite one of the Dutch Army ponchos.
Yes.
Basically, they double up as a tarp, so you can sleep under them. You can get a Dutch Army poncho liner, which turns your poncho into a sleeping bag and bivvy bag in one. So you kind of like multiplying things together. Yes, you want to have a cutting implement obviously, rules
I will always be a keen advocate of the British Army survival knife.
I know,
But the legality there of carrying that is very...
It's a big chunk of steel.
Yeah.
So, talking legality, if you're going to have a knife and you're going to go out walking, if you're out in the countryside, yeah, you can have a good standard kind of bushcraft knife.
The legal length is
3 inches.
3 inches.
In the UK.
Non-locking.
Non-locking 3-inch foldable blade. Okay. So yeah, you can have a penknife. And to be fair, you could pretty much get away with most things with a good quality penknife.
You do not want something that is terrible quality.
But I like my Scandinavian puku knives and things like that.
Oh yeah, I do like the wooden handled things.
Then you can get away with just a hatchet.
True.
So if you're doing wood prep, you need to chop logs, you need to shave things down. You can do a huge amount with just a hatchet. But if you're going to carry those things, make sure that they're deep in the bottom of your pack.
Yeah. You do not want to be having them on show.
Look at me.
Walking around or passing through a town somewhere.
No.
Then you're going to get somebody coming after you.
That's going to be your own fault. But yeah, a good knife. Everybody's always, one of the questions that comes up all the time on bushcraft sites, survival sites. What do you recommend is the best knife to get? Well, the best knife is the one that you're the most happy with, the one that works for you.
British Army survival knife. That's what I'm saying.
That's our camp all-round tool.
I love it. It's so durable.
I know. It's just a big tool to do stuff with. And as I say, I'd have my smaller knife for doing the finer work. But again, a knife and a hatchet and a small knife, fine. But you don't need a huge amount of stuff. So if you're going out, you just want to make sure you've got a good pack, cooking equipment, a way of lighting fire, so a ferro rod, box of matches backup if you like, 2 ferro rods, 3 ferro rods everywhere. Make sure that you can stay dry and you can stay warm. If you are dry and you are warm and you're not thirsty, so, again, either take water with you or get yourself, when you can afford it, a filtration system.
Like a life straw, for instance.
Life straw. In fact, life straw and other products as well, they do them so they can actually fit into a flask. So you can literally fill the flask up and then it'll filter from the flask. 40 quid for a life straw, one of those. They can get more. I think there's one called the Grail, but I think that's about £100, much more expensive. But
the Grail, I love it. I love that.
But you get lots of different filter systems. But the thing is, it depends on where you are, what your water supply is. Yes, you carry water with you. That adds weight to your pack. You don't have to carry water with you if you know the environment you're going into, and you can filter your own water, which cuts down on the weight. And you always got a drink to hand. So stay warm, stay dry. Don't get thirsty.
I was going to say it boils down to those 3 things. It's the shelter, the fire, and having something to drink.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's nothing better than being dry in the pouring rain and still be able to make yourself a nice warming brew and just sit there and go, this is fantastic.
Yeah, just enjoying.
What's worse is if your feet are cold, your socks are wet,
you're being dripped on,
through,
you have no fire.
You have no fire, you've got nothing to drink, and you're hungry, and you go, why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah, precisely.
So that's the difference, but it doesn't have to be that way.
No.
So anyway, there you go. Bushcraft, learning to live in the wild comfortably.
So do you reckon, we've covered bushcraft and wild camping on 2 episodes now of the Now We Know Show podcast. Do you reckon we should come back, do something else?
Well, I think we've got lots of aspects to it, because obviously we do have our...
Again, it's quite... we breezed over quite a lot in this particular episode.
Yeah, I think if you've got specific areas you want to discuss about, so for example, if you wanted to talk about water purification, we could talk about that. If you want to talk about fire prep, ways to light fires, we could talk about that. If you want to talk about shelters, different types of shelters, we talk about that.
Maybe it could even boil down to the more extreme thing of the extreme survival. Yeah. We've covered the leisurely aspects of bushcraft, but maybe putting ourselves... What would we do in one of these survival situations, maybe?
Well, this is true. But again, if you're going to put yourself into a survival situation, I think it's very hard to just mentally kind of like you're always going to work your way around. We can discuss what you'd hope to do, but again, it's down to what's there in the environment that you can put to your use.
Again, and then sometimes, for instance, this is going to, again, latch on to that prepping aspect of things, isn't it? Because we've done prepping for solar storms, disasters of every which way.
I think I'd definitely like to come back and do. We're obviously doing more prepping episodes, and
stay tuned for that.
We need to cover the EDCs, which we keep mentioning.
We will get to it. We will get to it.
Cover the grab bags or the bug out bags, as we prefer to call them.
Oh, that's really funny because somebody mentioned in the cold open of episode 6 of the Now We Know Show podcast. Episode 6. So that's way back. That was the adventure game fail.
Oh, yes.
That we all have fond memories of. Don't say it. Yes. Don't say it.
Nubbly women.
Ah, he said it.
Nubbly women.
And we mentioned in the cold open of that, which I released, I think it was the beginning of this week, we mentioned going to Mount Fitchett and the Toy Museum.
Oh, yes.
Which we eventually got to in episode 56.
Oh, there you go.
So we will get to it. We will get to
episode 65, are we?
This is episode 65.
Oh, there you go. Maybe episode 122 or something.
Oh, I'm sure we can get it in sooner than that.
Of course. So anyway, so find out if you're interested in bushcraft, then take a look on YouTube. By all means, buy as many books as you can't beat. More books the better. Just buy books.
Yeah, don't base all your knowledge on one book.
No. You always find there's different tips in different books, and people do different things in different ways. And one way that somebody does something is not always going to be the way you'll find to be the best way for you.
Yes.
And also go on social media by all means. There are plenty of wonderful social media groups out there. Again, JJ Outdoors. I don't run my own social media group for bushcraft, but JJ, he does, and it's a wonderful community. So get on JJ Outdoors.
Very friendly people.
Very friendly people. You need to know anything, they'll answer. And I've never come across any of this bizarre stuff you get on a lot of the other ones where people, berate people for not knowing. Not the 20th time somebody's asking what's the best knife to do this with.
I mean, come on. If somebody's new to it. And everybody's really good. So find a community that suits you, talk to people, and just enjoy. But bushcraft is a fantastic skill, life skill, and hobby to have. I'd recommend it. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe to this channel and comment below any suggestions of topics or activities you'd like to listen to in future episodes.
So it looks like we've managed to survive this podcast.
Just about, I think. That's a big bushcrafting goodbye from Zak.
And a big 2 is 1, 1 is none goodbye from Buzz. Goodbye.
You can find the Now We Know Show podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music and Apple Podcasts. Check out the Zak Wylde Productions social media pages on Instagram and Facebook, or visit the Zak Wylde Productions website at www.zakwyldeproductions.com. Please get in contact. We'd love to find out how you're listening to us. So get in touch in the comments, and don't forget to check out Zak Wylde Productions on Patreon to become an official ZWP patron today.